Welcome back, it's me, Lou. For today's video, we are diving deep into my toy vault as we take a look at some old vintage toys. More specifically, we are looking at the Cyclone armor from the new generation of Robotech. Or for some of you anime diehards out there, this is the armor bike from Genesis Climber Mospeada. And this is the stick type right here. Or going by the westernized name, Scott Bernard's Cyclone armor. Alright, so where to begin? Okay, so back in the mid or early 80s, growing up, probably like around the 3rd grade, I was really into the anime Robotech. They used to air it every weekday morning, and I'd watch it before going to school. It was awesome. I loved it. And I also loved the 3rd generation of Robotech, which was Genesis Climber Mospeada. But in the States, I think we just called it the new generation. And there were toys that were available for it at the time. I remember Toys R Us had some of the Genesis Climber Mospeada toys, but they weren't branded as Robotech. They were just still the Japanese branded toys. And one of the toys I had was this guy on the right. This was the Scott Bernard Cyclone armor. It saw, I think, a couple of different releases in the US. When I was younger, the first version that came out was, I think it was the Gakken Henshin Robo Genesis Climber Mospeada armor bike. And then at a certain point in time, they actually even released actual Robotech branded one. But I had the first release, and I remember that toy, as awesome as this looked, the original Japanese one, it was a pain in the butt to transform. The joints were super stiff and tight, and I remember I was in 3rd grade, and I'm like, I need to loosen these joints up. So I took a screwdriver, and I was like trying to loosen up the screws. And I remember my mom saw me because I just bought the toy, and she's like, "You just bought that? Are you gonna break it already?" So, yeah, I had fond memories of it. And I remember later on, it was one of those toys. It didn't really survive like the early months that I owned it, because these things were like super fragile. If you ever handled any, like, I'm not gonna like transform this because, for one, the rarity of it, and also that it's very fragile. It was fragile back then, and I can't imagine a toy from 1985 being durable right now, especially if the plastic's like deteriorating. So we're just gonna look at it. So yeah, when I first had this, the first version I bought, it broke after a few months. Then I think maybe like a year later, they released like an actual Robotech branded one, and I got that. And I remember that one it actually transformed, and I remember all the pieces actually moved as smooth as butter. Whereas the original one I had, it was a nightmare trying to like transform. So if you're unfamiliar with the cartoon, in Robotech, this is kind of like an emergency vehicle that the Alpha Fighters had stored within their chest cavity. So Scott Bernard, he crash lands on Earth trying to fend off the Invid invasion, and he loses his Alpha Fighter, but he does have his backup vehicle, which is the armor bike. And that was stored inside of the mech's chest cavity. So the armor bike is essentially this. It's a motorcycle, but then it transforms and it turns into body armor. And this is kind of like the end result right here. And let's take a look at this. Let's start off with this guy. So this is not my original childhood toy. This was something I hunted down on eBay like years ago. I was like on some sort of weird Robotech kick, and I just wanted to try to hunt down some of my old toys. And I got this guy. I want to say I paid at the time anywhere between $75 to $100 on eBay, which sounds like a lot, but the price that this thing's going for now is like, it's like through the roof. So it's like I was very fortunate to get this when I did, considering how much it costs now. And this is almost complete. The only thing it's missing is the kickstand. So this guy, you can actually remove the armor here, and then you could transform the armor into the bike that looks like this. And this figure here, it's maybe like about a 9-inch tall action figure. It's cool. His visor closes down. His head can rotate. And there's all sorts of articulation, like his arm. It's almost like modern articulation with the action figures. Arms rotate. There's actually a elbow swivel, elbow bend, and there's even like a thigh cut here. So this, considering that this toy was originally from the 80s, it's kind of crazy to see how much articulation it has. So here's an up-close shot of Scott Bernard in his rider armor. There's a profile. Now, one thing that drove me nuts as a kid is that I always thought that if you press these buttons down, the missiles would shoot out. But maybe because of like certain toy laws in the US, I think the missiles were glued in. And I remember as a child, I kept on insisting that these would shoot out. So I kept on pressing on these as hard as I could. And eventually these buttons just kind of like snapped off. But I think the original Japanese toys were spring-loaded. So if you have the original Japanese one, you might actually be able to shoot these out. Here's the back. Scott Bernard, or as his Japanese name is Stick, I believe. He was from Mars Base 21. And this is cool. This is kind of like the front of the bike, like right here. And this is kind of like the heads-up display where the gauges are and all that. This leg armor here, so when he's in like fully transformed, like armored up mode, the legs extend. And then if you press these buttons down, you can like shorten the legs like that. So when he's not riding them, when he's not wearing the armor, his legs are kind of kept up like this. But then when he's wearing the armor, this extends down. I don't know why. Yeah, this is great. I love this toy. It's like one of those weird things that like a piece of my childhood that I'm so glad that I like found on eBay for. I mean, for some people, they'll, you know, $75 to $100, that might be a lot. You know, if you're a toy collector, you can sympathize with me. You know, if you're a Robotech fan and you grew up during the 80s, you know that this is not something that goes pretty cheap nowadays. The Cyclone armor, or the Mospeada armor bike, it's seen many iterations over the last maybe like 20 years from like different companies. A handful of companies have produced their version of this, and those go for a lot of money. And I'm not just talking on like a collector's value. I'm just talking like right off the bat. Like some of those I think go for like initially maybe like anywhere between $200 to $300, and they're considerably a lot smaller than this too. This guy here, he's about 8.5 inches. But these other ones are a lot smaller than that. You know, I think some of the more recent ones might be like 1/12 scale, and those might go for like $250. But yeah, this is great. Piece of my childhood. I'm kind of glad I have it. So over here is the Matchbox version. So Matchbox, during the 80s, they had the Robotech license, and they made some unique toys. These were toys that were never made in Japan. You know, they're strictly made here for the Robotech cartoon. The Matchbox figures were 3 3/4. They were kind of articulated like the old school G.I. Joes. Let's get this into focus. So as you can see, very similar articulation scheme. You know, with the bicep swivel, the way the arms move. It even has like the rubber band waist. And this is Rand. He's kind of like Scott Bernard's friend. He's actually native to Earth, unlike Scott, who was like born in space. So Rand's the one that kind of shows him the ropes of what life is like on Earth. They become best friends, and Rand joins Scott's like freedom fighting force against the alien Invid who have taken over. And I love this toy. This was a great toy because I remember, like, you know, for me, this would serve dual purpose. You know, not only would I use this for Robotech, but since it was in the same scale as G.I. Joe, you know, I'd migrate this vehicle over into my G.I. Joe play scenarios. So my Joes would use this also. Yeah, great vehicle. If you're very fond of Robotech, you know, you'll recognize this instantly. I remember this toy being awesome too because it had like real rubber tires. And then I'm very fortunate that these tires haven't dry rotted over the years. They're still soft and spongy like day one. And the wheels, they spin so smooth, especially the rear one. And lastly, we come to this model kit. This is the Genesis Climber Mospeada 1/24 scale Super Real Type with a rider figure. This is the armor bike. This is Stick type. So Stick is this, he's the same character as Scott Bernard, just different name. Alright, so this, I'm not sure if this is like the original vintage OG model kit from Japan. I always say that because the price tag is only $2.99, and I bought this in Las Vegas. So prior to the pandemic, I used to go to Las Vegas a lot. I'd be there 3 to 5 times a year. I'd go there for like UFC. I was a big UFC fan, so anytime there was a big UFC fight, we were always in Las Vegas. I'd go there for AVN, the Adult Video News Awards, which, if you're familiar with that, it's kind of like the Oscars for the porn industry. And one of the weekends we were out in Vegas, there was a comic book convention, and we hit that up. And I found this little gem. I think I paid maybe like 15 bucks for it. And I had to have it because, you know, there's a chance this might be the original OG model kit from the 80s. And for me, it was all about owning a piece of history. You know, I'm a big Robotech fan. I have the entire Genesis Climber Mospeada collection on DVD. And I'm like, I just kind of need this. You know, it's hopefully it's authentic. So it's a model kit, and I might never ever put it together. Even though, you know, the idea of putting this model kit together does kind of intrigue me. So yeah, it's awesome. It has kind of like that official seal right there. I believe that's the Tatsunoko seal. I might be wrong on that though. Alright, yeah, so this was kind of just like a small trip down memory lane. If you're a fan of Robotech or Genesis Climber Mospeada, you know, this is probably something that you go look at and go, oh, I remember that. That was the cool, like, Robotech motorcycle that transformed into body armor. So yeah, I'm very nostalgic for these kind of toys. I'm glad I bought these when I did. It's like I said, nowadays this goes for a crazy amount of money, and for me, it's not about buying it because it's worth a lot of money. It was more so just wanting like my childhood memories back. And it's weird because I know we shouldn't be very materialistic, but you know, it's just one of those things that's kind of had to have. You know, I kind of regret that my old toy was broken and it was lost and all the pieces were gone, but it's nice to have an almost complete one. You know, I'd like to be able to display this, but the plastic doesn't hold up like it used to, and every time you stand this guy up, he tips over. But it's just a nice, you know, collector's piece to own. Alright, with that being said, let's wrap this up. Once again, my name is Lou. If you're new to my channel, welcome. If you're a returning subscriber viewer, thank you so much for continued likes, comments, and support. I greatly appreciate it. So, until the next video, be safe, take care of yourself, buy lots of toys, and most importantly, be happy. And I'll see you at the next one. Alright, later.